Welcome to the Trailblazers. I'm your host, Perry Rarick. The purpose of the Trailblazers is to share with you interesting and thought provoking discussions I have with trailblazing business leaders. They're innovative, they're experts at what they do, and they're not afraid to challenge the status quo. My Trailblazer guests, plural, my guest today, that more than one guest, is Michelle Rovner. She is Director of Marketing for the Professional Society for Health Economics and Outcomes Research, more commonly known as ISPOR, and Greg Ippolito. He is the President and Creative Director at Ippolito Media Arts. They are a B2B digital agency. This is very exciting. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who they are. Michelle is a seasoned marketing and communications professional with over 20 years of service, very diverse experience across nonprofit, for-profit, government sectors. She has a reputation for strategic thinking, creative problem solving, and impactful leadership. Throughout her career, Michelle has managed various aspects of marketing, including brand development, public relations, digital marketing, social media management, market research, and product launches. And I need to take a breath after that. And she is passionate about using data-informed insights. I'm going to say that again, and we're going to hear about that when we start talking data-informed insights to plan and execute marketing strategies. Greg is a 25-year veteran of the marketing profession and has developed award-winning campaigns and marketing strategies for clients as varied as Hyundai, Shire Pharmaceuticals, Vertex, Sony Electronics, and Premier Dental. He holds a Master's of Education in Educational Psychology, which I read his blogs and I see his posts. I think he uses that every day when he communicates complex ideas to target audiences. And I'm guessing we're going to be a little bit on the receiving end of that today during our discussion. So both Michelle and Greg strongly believe that great marketing is simultaneously entertaining, thought-provoking, and educational. And I can promise you our discussion today is going to be that. Michelle and Greg, welcome back to the Trailblazers.
Thanks for having us, Perry. Great to be back.
All right.
Productions.
It's going to get better. We have so much fun talking, and it was about time that we shared this with an external audience. So, as I said, both Michelle and Greg have been guests on the Trailblazers before, but separately. They were both separately part of interviews. After their appearances, I learned that they were friends and they've worked together. And I thought, oh, we've got to get you together on the Trailblazers. So here we are. Today, we're going to explore B2B content marketing and how to measure results, broadly speaking. We're going to get into some nauseating detail. AI is going to be kind of hanging around and jumping in and out of the conversation because every time we talk about marketing nowadays, AI comes up. And I think this is coming at a great time of year because marketing teams are planning or should be planning for 2026. I think this is going to kind of help them think about that before they actually get into the planning. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to start with a very broad, open-ended question. And I'll let whoever wants to take it can begin. But what is going well in B2B marketing and B2B content marketing specifically? What is going well and what should we keep doing and doing more of? Who would like to start us off?
I'll give it a shot, Perry. It's interesting that you kind of frame the whole discussion around B2B content marketing because I think one of the things generally people are doing well, and of course there's some are doing it better than others, but focusing on content, valuing once again content as sort of a central part or a core part of a marketing strategy. I think for a few years that it started to drift to the wayside a little bit. Content marketing had sort of its biggest focal point around 2015 to 18, and then it started to drift off in favor of other things. But with, you mentioned AI, with the rise of generative AI search, which is now being shortened to GEO or AIO, we can't seem to agree on an acronym quite yet. Um, but we're seeing more of a focus on generating content. The better marketers are generating, to your point, entertaining, thought-provoking content. Other marketers are ironically leveraging Gen AI tools to crank out high volumes of not very interesting derivative content, which is creating an atmosphere where the marketers that are doing it well really have a leg up on everybody else. But because everyone understands broadly that good SEO practices lead to good GEO, AIO practices, we're seeing a lot more content and a lot more focus, a psychological mindset towards content's important again. So I think what happens over the next several months and years is going to be really interesting to see how it sort of bifurcates the market between people doing it really well and people just cranking out a lot of garbage. But we're at a very interesting time, but across the board, content is king once again, and as it should be.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'm gonna add a little to that. And I 100% agree with what Greg's referring to when it comes to content being king again. I agree that there's a lot of content out there, but to the point of great entertaining and educational content that isn't a direct hard sell is what's gonna be the front runner. You've got a lot of people that are going to be utilizing and that currently utilize these AI platforms to generate mundane, boring stuff, and we've spoken before about creating content for content's sake. That is what we want to avoid, right? Word salad, get the noise out of the market and really focus on high value, educational. And if you can entertain people by educating them, that is the bread and butter, and that really will set you apart from other marketing campaigns and other marketing organizations.
Yeah, very interesting in that, eh, from a consumer of content's point of view, it's so easy to detect bad content, stuff that maybe has, maybe had an over reliance on ChatGPT or AI generated content without another look. No human nuance at all, and it comes at you, and you check out, as soon as you see
Yeah.
it. Is AI going to so, I'm gonna sum up what both of you said. There's good content and there's not so good content, bad content, the good and the bad, and there's this chasm in between. Is AI going to help bridge the gap, or is it gonna make it worse? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I'll take this one to start. I think AI will help bridge the gap for the marketers that use it with purpose. Well, for the marketers that use AI to help, I don't want to say ID by any stretch of the imagination because you need to come up with some of your own natural ideas where it's just going to be noise in the market. But if you need a different way of saying something, what AI can do is give you a different way of saying something. But that human oversight, your brand voice, your brand tone, all of that still needs to be woven into that to make it authentic. Or people are going to read right through it as more marketing jargon that was created by AI. You lose authenticity, you lose brand value, you lose brand trust, and therefore you're going to lose brand loyalty and you're not going to get any of your customers back. So I really think it can help bridge that gap on moving the needle forward without creating this mundane marketing nonsense that you read it and going, "I've read this 10 times before," stick another brand name at the top, and you've got their same marketing campaign. You wanna avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. Greg?
Yeah, no, I echo the same sentiments. It really comes down to who is using these tools and what their mind frame is. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you're jumping onto a large language model device like a chat GPT and you're going in there thinking, all right, I need this thing to crank me out a blog post, you're dead in the water. But if you're using it, to Michelle's point, to say, all right, I've written a draft of something I think is really thought provoking, but I'm curious to see Are there subtopics within this topic that my audience would like to know about? Is there something I'm missing? Or am I phrasing this in a way that maybe I'm losing some of my audience? Because one of the things that these large language models do really well, really what they're built to do, is to go across these vast oceans of data and look for patterns, look for repetition, look for if you're writing an article about topic X, what is the most sort of acceptable and engaging piece of content that's already out there? So if you're giving ChatGPT something brand new, but maybe some of it is over the head of your audience or to the left or right of how they would like to hear it, ChatGPT can help kind of like take your original content and give it more of a populist voice, a more digestible voice. So it's fantastic for stuff like that. So bottom line, if you're using it to crank out high volumes of content, if you're using it to ideate, I think you're going in the wrong direction. If you're starting with original human thought and using it as a tool to optimize it for certain purposes, then that's the key to using it going forward.
And I have another comment for that, yeah, because you just sparked
Mm.
my thought on something else when you talk about audiences, right? So if you have a piece of original content, and I always ask ChatGPT or whatever platform I'm using at the time, "What's your thought on this piece?" And just to
Yeah.
see what it tells me and say, what will this resonate? Will this resonate with ABC professional? And sometimes what you get back, you're like, "Ouch, you just hurt my feelings a little bit." But on the flip side, you really can get an idea because it's looking across to say, yeah, this is pretty good. Like, okay, we might need to tweak this and this, or nope, we're going to redo this because this is completely missing the mark. It's not going to tell you everything you want to hear either. So I think that you
Yeah.
can use it to your benefit, but never to ideate or pretend it's your original thought. That is just regurgitating on someone else's original thought that they shoved into ChatGPT themselves or something that's already out on the market.
Total. And Michelle, I'll digress even further, jumping off of your point. Um, there's so much comparison between Google and ChatGPT and Google and large language models, and people are moving from here to here, which is completely false. We can get into that if we want to do that. Um, but I think there is this sort of the way the user interfaces look, right? It's sort of like this empty box in Google or ChatGPT was, oh, what can I help you with or whatever, and you plug it in. So I think people see them as like equivalent tools in terms of how users use them. But really, I think to your very point, there's a certain we're starting to realize that Gen AI tools, there's a real nuance to how to use them well, to ask follow-up questions and questions to the left and right to try to really vet out the content that you're developing within the platform. Is it right for this audience? Is it right given what's going on, culturally in this moment? And if you can work the tool well, if you become a master of the tool, you could use it for great purposes. The digression I'm going to get to is I wouldn't be surprised if we wind up seeing a cottage industry that recognizes this and develops where it's like we can train you in a few sessions to you how to use ChatGPT really, really well. The same way you want to someone might be trained on I barely know what I'm doing when I open up Microsoft Excel. I need to know the nuances of how to like really get the most out of this thing because it's not as intuitive as like Microsoft Word, right? So I think that's going to be that's something we're going to see within the next 6 9 months. So like here's how to use ChatGPT really, really well. Here's how to go to the next level with it, how to be an expert, a master of this tool.
It correlates to data, right? Bad data in, bad data out. And if you're not
Right.
guiding and asking the right questions of Chat GPTs and the Geminis of the world, it's the same thing about your data. If you're not asking the right questions, data is going to tell you whatever you want it
Absolutely.
to say. So I think they're very much related. One's just using words, the other's just using numbers.
Yep. 100%.
So I'm gonna take you by the hands and go with you down this rabbit hole of AI, and maybe this is now a data-driven conversation rather than data informed. But I want to ask. So not only are we going to learn, AI is constantly learning. So I want to go to something you said, Michelle, which is you can ask it, hey, what kind of audience will this topic resonate? And it actually has an opinion. Won't that opinion get better? Won't it be more informed and be able to better help us with those kind of questions going forward?
I would say yes, but again, you have to ask it the right questions. For example, something as very basic as let's pretend you're crafting an email and you're trying to change your tone, make more professional. You type in, "Hey Greg, hope you had a good weekend. Had time to meet today?" Question mark. Take that in, dump it into whatever AI platform, make
Right.
you more professional. "Hi Greg, how was your weekend?" It'll structure things. Might your calendar have time to speak about A, B, and C in the coming week?
Yeah.
Or you could say, make more professional speaking to an academician in the research space about these topics. You can train it to get more granular and more specific based on the layers that you put on it. So that's a very basic rudimentary example, but to your question, you can do it in the reverse. You could dump a piece of content that's written for an academician and say, put into layman's terms. And then you take and you're like, "Oh, great." Just like we look at how do I do X, Y, and Z? We look at YouTube videos that teach us how to do that. This I see in a very similar way, utilizing these platforms to teach us how to do different things, but it has to start with original thought. I'm always going to go back to you're not going to dump in a chat GPT, write me an email that does this. No, you have to start with original content. And that will always be the crux of all conversations for me when we talk about anything derived from AI.
Yeah, great points. Just super insights. Okay, so I want to go back to the question I initially asked, which was what should we keep doing? Okay, and I'm going to call this we need to create good content. We need to be able to create good content. And I'm going to so let's say I'm the head of a marketing team. I've assembled my team and I said, you know what? We're going to do what Michelle and Greg recommended. I'm convinced we need to create more high quality content. And then I'm going to look back at my organization. Do I have the capabilities to do this? And what kind of resources do I need to do this? So, what would you say? What do I need to be able to do that well within my marketing team?
I think first you need to find what great content is. I mean, I think what we sometimes like, yes, this is going to be the greatest ebook on the face of the planet. And no one downloads it. Why not?
Right.
You that's where the data component look comes into play. You have to be able to one define what your parameters are going to be for calculating what is great content and what you're going to do more of. You have to be able to measure it compared to a goal. And I think that's the first place you start. Do you have the resources to one, track and project manage and measure what you're going to do? And do you have a goal you're trying to achieve? It's all linear and related.
Okay, so you're not talking about a theoretical definition of good content. You're
Mhm.
talking about what content is going to be seen as good by the people I'm trying to reach.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I would add to that. I think, this is once again a situation where you want to leverage both technology and data and the human mind. So what we typically do at IMA is we will work with a variety of different people in anticipation of or in the building of a content calendar. So this will involve keyword research, if people within a certain market, we're seeing increases in certain searches, certain topics that they're interested in. We're looking not just at, what the top 10 articles are in this industry right now, but what has been growing over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks that's going to hit a critical mass next month or the month after, right? We also look at talk to SMEs who will tell us, or salespeople who can tell us, who are listening to their customers, like, here's what people are starting to get concerned about. It's small right now, but the buzz is growing, and in another month or two, they're going to really want to know. And then you bring together again the data and the anecdotal data of like what people are just hearing on the street. And you bring that together around a table and you're like, okay, so as we're starting to talk about what type of ebook or blog or infographic, whatever we want, forget the format. And we're talking about the topic that we want to be talking about next week, the week after, next month. Let's start to build out the calendar based around really you're developing content to, like Michelle was saying earlier, not to drive a sale today, but to anticipate or to recognize a concern in the marketplace and to give them valuable information that's going to make someone who's out there worried feel like, okay, I have a handle on this. And that's how you build a content calendar. That's how you start to think about content. ChatGPT is and Perplexity and Dolly and all these other AI Gen AI platforms are tools to help you bring that content to fruition. But what you're creating and how you reach an audience in a way that's meaningful still comes down to data and human beings getting around the table and talking it out. Because sometimes, in those conversations, something that looks like an absolute home run in terms of, say, a trending keyword, once you get around the table and you start to, someone starts to explain why that might be not what we're going after because XYZ factors around that keyword search that you're unaware of until because you can't get all of your information from a screen. You know, then you realize, okay, so it's really the combination of those things, and ultimately, I know I'm like a dead horse if you listen to me talk over different podcasts or you read my writing, it's just hard work. There's no way of getting away from hard work. It never there's no plug and play solution. There's no new tool or technology that's going to make it easy. If it's easy, if you feel like your job's easy, you're not doing
I'm
it.
not doing it right.
You're just not.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, like, Greg, when we do a lot of the same at ISPOR when it comes to content creation, right? We have a top 10 trends in the health economics and outcomes research space. We do a top 10 trends on uh, content every other year because we actually survey our entire audience base on the top 10 trends in health economics and outcomes research. Then we have layers of rigorous scientific review on these top 10 trends. What's moving the needle? What's not? Whatever makes the top 10 trends based on what our audience is telling us, we create content around those top 10 trends. And then we listen to our partners, we listen to our members on what their pain points are. And then we look at our organizational needs, right? So all of it follows what we have a 2030 strategy. All of it rolls up to support that 2030 strategy. And one of our strategic arenas is to be able to expand the impact and the value of health economics and outcomes research. Well, we have to share that information with new audiences. And so we created content that it's called HUR Explain that attracts new audiences and explains to them why HUR is important and why they should care. Right. And so that's the educational piece while still serving your core audience that are on the cutting edge of health economics and outcomes research and healthcare delivery. So it's a matter of how you bridge the gap between really creating content that's meaningful, that's important, that's educational, that's attractive and interesting and entertaining all at the same time. It is hard. It is difficult. It is not easy by any stretch. And I echo, if you think there's a silver bullet, you're wrong.
Yeah. I love the way you guys talk about hard work, and there's nothing wrong there. Hard work should be celebrated, and I'm with you on that. So I'm glad you brought that up. I This is fascinating. I When I asked that question, okay, do I have the means, the capabilities, the means to create content? I was thinking, do I have the bench? Do I have the creators? Do I have access to subject matter experts? You slowed my thinking down and said, well, wait a minute. First, you got to figure out what good content is. That's the capability, that knowledge. So I love that. Greg, something you said that really is worth repeating and maybe talking a little bit more about is when you created the calendar. I've been in so many meetings where you get the spring butt that jumps up out of a seat on the corner on the edges. We need more video. That's the kind of content we need. We need to do, I'm going to triple our budget for video. What you're talking about is topics that resonate with your target audience, with the people you're trying to reach.
Uh,
How do you slow groupthink down enough to steer them into that type of hard thinking? And you could, either one of you can
yeah.
answer that.
No, that I'll take the lead on this one. I'm sure I can half hear Michelle's thoughts as I'm about to say this. Uh, I, it like Michelle likes to talk about, like I like to talk about, being data informed. So it goes right back to what you were just talking about a moment ago, which is, or what I was sort of alluding to a moment ago, which is, the if there was some magic wand technology that can solve all of this and like plug and play and I'm good to go. I, I think the hope that that's true, and there are companies that have been trying to sell this for 15 years, um, and it's all magic wand nonsense. But there part of it is the belief that I can get incredible efficiency and ROI back if I invest in some technology X. But the other part of it, which I think is just as important for marketing leaders is, or just as enticing for marketing leaders is, if I can plug and play this technology that not only will generate the content or do whatever, post it to platforms or analyze it or optimize it, it will also give me the analytics I need to prove that it's working, right? So when you start to talk about creative or content or anything, or bringing more humanity into the process, people that deal with numbers hate that because it's soft. It's hard to, you can count on a technology. If it does a certain thing and it does it well, it's going to do it over and over and over again reliably. You can count on a calculator to always calculate properly. It's never going to be wrong as long as you use it correctly. But when you're talking about writers or videographers or art directors, how do I know what they're making me is good? So going back to the data informed thing, yes, we like to start with topic, and we usually have a pretty firm handle on what our audiences are, or what target audience X is going to want to hear about next week, next month, whatever. So that we can get down pretty well. In terms of format, that's something that we can test. So if we know the topic X is going to hit hard next week or in 2 weeks, let's roll that out as, a 60-second video with like a did you know sort of thing. Let's roll out a short infographic, and then let's roll out a blog post. And let's see for this audience what they gravitate towards. And surprisingly, and this is why I loathe to hear uh, claims like we need more video or we need more fill in the blank, Mad Lib style. Um, that may be true broadly. If you look at like across the board that video is earning more engagement or marketing teams are generating more video, that doesn't necessarily mean that your audience is going to gravitate towards video. We've dealt with some, especially in B2B, there are some oddball audiences out there, people that are knee deep in very granular detail on a particular subject. Some of those people would prefer a 35-page white paper to a 5-minute video that has the same information. So it really comes down to, if you know what your audience needs to hear about, what they're worried about, how you can help them. The format is a matter, for us, has always been a matter of testing. Let's try it as this versus this versus this, and let's see how this audience responds. And usually, you do like an A/B test or an ABC split test on format, you're going to get a pretty definitive winner of one over the other. And then you're like, okay, well, this may indicate that this audience really loves, information like this delivered as infographic. And we'll never take one test as rule, but it will take it as an indicator that this is a format that may be appealing to them. And then we'll run more tests down the road. Usually, for any of our clients' audiences, we have like a top 3, top 5 list of a topic of this sort. These are the types of formats you want to go to first. And it takes a long time to get to that, but it's great because then down the road, when you're developing a content calendar and you're going to be talking about something on this part of the spectrum, subject wise, you already know you have a good foot forward on how you want to deliver that content, knowing your audience through the research you've done in the past. So it's a long process, but once you got it, you're really rolling.
Yeah, and I think part of that is when it comes to what you're willing to pilot with. Everyone loves a good pilot program, right? So you stick with what you know is going to drive results to start. And then from there, when you talk about bench strength is also about resources, monetary resources, time, resources, and don't forget about staff time if you're an organization, because a lot of times staff time isn't taken into account on the cost of a project. So when you think about bench strength and yeah, everyone wants video, everyone wants X, Y, and Z, but how many people are going to sit and watch a half an hour video? I've got the attention span of a gnat. You got about 7 seconds, and I'm like, oh, look, shiny object. And that's human nature now, right? With the vast amount of information. So our audience was a little bit of an awakening when I started moving into the nonprofit research sector of healthcare, from the healthcare IT sector. Healthcare IT was very short, sweet, to the point content. Wake up call for Michelle when I came to the nonprofit research space. They like everything but the kitchen sink in every email, and they react well to it. I'm like, what is this world we're living in? And you learn your audience based on who you're talking to, your stakeholder. You create content to serve that audience attention span, not just what they're interested in, but their attention span as well. And you tend to learn that based on time on screen on your website, their click rates through your email. That won't tell you really time on screen for your email, but how fast from their open to their click to the website did it take them, right? So you start learning those behaviors, and you stay tried and true what works, and then you test something new as you progress in phase 2 and 3. I think a lot of times marketers want to try everything all at one time, and then the needle moves and they have no idea what moved the needle, because you try to do an A/B test, but you tested 9 different things.
Right.
So, and it's really trying to keep contained the excitement of always trying to be the new thing and sticking with, guess what? I know what's gonna work. Let's start there, and then let's test this about 10% of the budget on these things. And it's being able to have a lot of confidence and a little bit of common sense, and you got to use your gut and your instinct, which ties to when we talk about AI. The human touch, it goes a long way in something that a computer will never replace.
Yeah.
Such a
And
no, go ahead,
because
Greg. If you want
sure,
to jump in, go ahead.
yeah, no, I just wanted to respond to that. 100%. And, you know, when you think about the best way to forget everything about everything, marketing, sales, everything, and just think about like gut gut intuition. What is the best way to develop a relationship with someone, to build trust, to put someone in the mindset where they want to hear from you, they like to be around you. If you give them a recommendation for something, they're likely to follow it, listen to you. It's one-to-one communication. It's sitting down across from someone, having a cup of coffee or a beer, and just letting the conversation flow, which means telling them about you, yes, but also listening thoughtfully, really listening and responding, and having a back and forth where I get to know you, you get to know me, et cetera. That's how you build trust. Mass communications by its very nature is the opposite of one-on-one. It's mass. You're trying to talk to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people in some cases, depending on the size of a campaign, instead of one-to-one. And I think we lose sight of what actually works, which is that coffee cup moment, that beer in a, across the table moment. Everything we build on a large scale should be, you're trying as hard as possible to get to that across the table moment. And that comes down to what you know about your audience, what data can tell you, what voice you can speak to them with, which is authentic to you, but also is a voice that they can receive, and on and on and on. As mass marketers, and I always tell my writers this, we should always be challenging ourselves to be as one to one as possible. And by one to one, that unfortunately has become synonymous with like filling in a bunch of personalization fields like Mad Libs, my second Mad Libs reference of the day. But it's really more having a true one-to-one communication between two human beings. So all mass communication should be striving towards that, but it's so easy to lose sight of. But that's what works. That's what builds trust. And especially in B2B, that's what moves the needle more than anything.
This is such a rich discussion. We're only one question in,
Oh, yeah.
and all of that has come out. That's why I love talking to you guys. It's so good. So we had a very interesting conversation about data a few days ago. So I want to go to question number two, and we this will cover a lot of ground too about measuring results. So when we're talking measuring results, there's data analytics. There's a term, Greg, that I think you want to send to the buzzword boneyard, which is data driven insights. ROI, return on investment. There's a lot of terminology that people are using to all mean the same thing, but they're very different. So I want to talk a little bit about, maybe we'll start with Michelle. I know you feel very strongly about understanding, using the data that is at our fingertips now to make better decisions. So, what would be some top of mind advice and things to think about as a marketing team starting to plan and thinking about measuring results?
Well, that's a loaded question. The first and foremost is don't measure everything because a lot of marketers get stuck in well, I'm going to measure it. If I can measure it, I'm going to measure it. Great. But for what? What are you trying to prove? Like what are you trying to achieve? What is your goal with XYZ piece of content? I will say I will use the ebook because it's the most relatable to most things. A downloadable ebook, right? That drives leads. You send people to your website, you ask them to fill out the form. You've got website analytics. You've got, new user, returning user, how many views, time on screen, load time. What's the load time on your website? How long did it take for your actual ebook to appear there? Did they fill out the form? Who filled out the form? First name, last name, company, email address. So you need to think about what you're trying to measure first. And I caution a lot of marketers because, yes, it is fascinating to look at all these numbers. But if you don't know what they mean, data will say whatever you want it to say. And sometimes that's the biggest challenge that I have found in my career is really looking at the data and picking out the nugget of information that's actually insightful. And to be able to do that, you have to build trends. You have to maintain a trend line, measure the same core items across all of your content. Because if you see a baseline, you're like, okay, great. I've established a baseline for my content. It typically has this many people on the website on this main landing page. It normally takes this many people, this many touches before they fill out the form. And this audience typically fills out the form. The other questions to ask is how are people getting there? Where am I leveraging this ad to drive people to this form? So starting with that core baseline there, and what is the goal of that content? The goal of that ebook is leads. And then from there, you qualify leads, right? But if the goal is for a blog post, for views, that is engagement metrics, not lead gen metrics. So you have to define the metrics that you're measuring as, in my opinion, as engagement or return on investment metrics. Because return on investment, you can say, I brought in this many leads that resulted in this much money, or this many hot leads that were handed over to sales that then closed this amount of dollars in business. So understanding what you're measuring, but more importantly, why you're measuring it is going to be key to any successful campaign, or quite frankly, as a campaign that's not successful. I look at, like I mentioned the other day, I learned something from every campaign that we run. I think, oh, that didn't go so well. And we are not doing that again. Great. What did we learn? Audience doesn't like this format. They don't like this length of an email. They don't like these words. They don't like being dear X, Y, and Z. So there's a lot to learn from campaigns, positive and negative. Just because one campaign worked well doesn't mean every campaign that you rinse and repeat this same way is going to work well either. So you have to be willing to learn from the data that you're looking at.
I want to add a
Absolutely.
follow up in there. So, what comes first? Is it the data, the observation of the data, or spending time with the why am I doing this? What do I want to discover?
Well, before you even create content, you need to ask yourself why. So I always think of the why. My first question, people are like, hey, we should do this. I go, why? What are we doing it for? Why are we going here? Why are we going to this restaurant? Well, they have good food, they have good reviews, they have what you like to eat. Great reasons. Let's go. So that's always my first is why. What goal are we trying to achieve? Really the 5 W's, and the how is the later part, right? The what, why, where, when, and then you go, so how are we gonna do that? Oh, we're gonna do it with this piece of content. Great. So those are the questions that I would always ask before you launch a new product, before you launch a new campaign, before you go to measure anything. Take a pause and ask yourself, why am I doing this? And sometimes you won't have an answer. Some because someone told me so. Great, but let me establish a why, and then we'll
Yeah.
go.
Awesome. Yeah.
There's also, if I can chip in here, because it's
Shit.
not exact,
Hey, Greg.
not exactly answering the question, but it's relevant to what Michelle is talking about. We're seeing increasing doubt around, and by all means, everyone should question. Every marketing leader should question, but questions like, "What's the value of an impression? Like, why do we even measure impressions? Does it matter? Is it moving the needle?" Um, which seems like a strange question because brand awareness is directly tied to impressions, or at least to reach. And we all understand, or at least I think we intuitively understand the importance of brand awareness. But I will offer this B2B tip that is related, if not directly answering the question, which is this: every B2B inbound campaign we've run for clients of ours, this is we're going to be we just celebrated our 12th anniversary. Every single one, the brand awareness portion of the campaign factored significantly into the lead gen efforts, not just the volume of the lead gen, but the quality of the lead gen. So, for example, if you have a basic lead gen campaign that's search based, where you're using a very detailed list of keywords that, when searched, are driving to a landing page that's giving content that's very relevant to that search and making connections and driving phone numbers, driving opt ins on a form, that's great. If you add brand awareness, you add display to that, you add LinkedIn posts, you add emails to support that, even if those things have nothing to do with the specific offer or the product on the landing page, you're just getting the brand out there in different ways. The the volume and quality of search goes up exponentially. So, we don't know exactly why because, again, when you're talking about trying to thread the needle between, uh, creating true attribution across all these channels, it's nearly impossible, and that's another thing I know we might wanna get into, but we can say confidently that if you're running an inbound lead gen campaign and you've decided to go, for instance, like Google AdWords only, we're not gonna worry about supporting this with other channels, you're highly limiting, the results that are gonna come back. Brand awareness is critical when it comes to lead gen campaigns, for what it's
Yeah.
worth.
Well, it's that multi-touch strategic integrated marketing, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
you have to touch a person multiple times. I think the last report I read was like 22, 27 times before they make a buying decision. And before they come to your website, they are 97% sure that they're going to buy from you. And this is B2C. B2B is a little different, but you have to be able to touch these people multiple times for that
Yep.
brand awareness to say, oh, yeah, I recognize that brand. Because if you're going to go buy a phone as a B2C person, and you're going to buy a phone, you're going to buy an Apple, Samsung most of the time, or maybe a Google phone, right?
Right.
If you go into any other name brand phone, aside from the top competitors, people are gonna look at it and go, "Well, is that a quality phone?" Because brand awareness leads people to this perceived, um, thought of quality,
Mhm.
loyalty. Oh, yeah, they're great because they've seen them so many times that they've instilled this perception that that brand is of some particular quality and has a loyal base. That is what awareness does for you. And if you are just coming out cold calling and it says spam likely on your phone, are you gonna answer that call?
Right.
Probably not, but you're gonna answer a call from someone that's saved in your phone. So it's that same thought process. We talk about brand recall. We talk about being able to identify brands. That comes extremely valuable when you're trying to drive leads because you don't have to convince them that you are of a quality brand when they're trying to fill out that lead form.
Yeah. Yeah. Familiarity breeds trust, and
Yep.
trust is more than anything, especially in B2B, the number one factor.
Absolutely.
It's the gateway. It has to be there. Greg, you brought this up, but I want to go to Michelle first on this. How do you, it's the A word, attribution. How do
Oh,
you approach
oh.
attribution? I knew this would strike a chord with you.
Also a pain. So attribution's challenging because most platforms, most marketers, and and it takes a lot of education for C-suite because they go to last touch. What was the last thing that this person touched before they converted? Cool.
Right.
It was Google because that was the last place they went. Or in GA4, it's either direct or none. Because they're either a known visitor, so they just typed in your website because of brand loyalty, but that brand loyalty was established through all the 9,000 things that you did before you built their trust, building their trust for them to make a decision.
Yep.
What we look at when I'm measuring direct return on investment items, for example, when I say I spent this much money in Google, netted this much tracked revenue. I can only do last touch. But I could also say that here is the path that this person went through before that last touch made them convert. That takes a lot of work. We go back to that work. That takes a lot of work, a lot of insight, and a lot of gut and intuition on where to drive them on the website that you think is going to make them convert. What path you want them to take to make them to convert in the path of least resistance. Then you factor in, oh, what display ad drove them to this piece of the website, and did they come in through the intended path? 9 times out of 10, they came in some pathway you didn't even know existed. And then you're like, how did I drive this many leads or this much conversion or this many dollars here on this product when I didn't have anything running there? Where did they decide and where did they go off the path that I wanted to get them to go on? And is this a better path? You have to be willing to look at that data and learn from that data. So, multi touch attribution is important, not because I need to say this campaign worked and this campaign didn't, because quite frankly, holistically, did we meet registration targets for the conference? Did we meet budget? Did I overspend the budget? No? Then we're doing pretty well here at Life. But what you really want to take away from that is, are my engagement metrics where they need to be? Is the pathway of education that I want these people to take working? Am I driving social conversions in the same way I'm driving email conversions? In my area, if I'm driving more social than email, I have a problem. So you need to understand what channel should be driving your most highest conversion rates comparative to what are engagement channels. And you need to understand the difference between the two. They are not one and the same, and they should not be treated the same.
You know, Michelle, at
Yeah.
Life Science Connect, we call that pathway the buyer's journey,
Yep.
and buyers is possessive. It belongs to them. They're going to make choices. We can encourage them, we could influence them, but it is so complex. I love what you said. When you analyze it, you're often surprised. How did they get there? We don't understand that. It's not what you predicted in advance.
And we found with our audience members, it's because they had a need to find information at about a specific topic at the point of interaction where I was top of mind. I sent them an email about a conference. They clicked on that email. They went to my desired location, killing it, right? Great. They went to the next step. They filled out the lead gen form, batting 1,000. They didn't register for the conference. What's going on? What did I say? Was it me? Is it you? And then you look at them come back. I'm like, oh, we mentioned real world evidence, for example. Okay. And then like they went to the RWE topic page. Oh, and they read 9 articles on X, Y, and Z. That's where data gets to the crossover between cool and then creepy cool again. Because you can see what you don't know who took that action, but you can see pathways that people are taking and say, oh, I can re-engage them about a session at the conference on RWE on this page. I might be able to bring them back to register for this conference. So you learn how to bring them back or figure out what pathway they're going on to make sure they stay engaged. I mean, data
Awesome.
can teach you a lot.
Yeah. Great stuff. Greg, you opened this topic on attribution. What do you have to add?
Well, a couple of things. One, sort of to jump on what Michelle was talking about. One of the things we've been able to do in the best case scenarios when the technology is right, et cetera, is sometimes if we are running campaigns that have a lead gen component, and the B2B buyer cycle can be very, very long, right? Depending on the industry, it could be 12, 18 months, sometimes a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. But if we have the right technology in place, after opt-in, we can sometimes track that back to IP addresses and get sort of a full scope of the types of content that person who opted in has been looking at. So, and if they are opting in to talk to a salesperson or to see a demo or whatever, great. If they're opting in just to download a white paper, then we have to wait. But at whatever point they're raising their hand as in market for a product or whatever the case to include you in it's part of an RFP. That's when we go back and look full journey. And to what you were saying, to what Michelle was taking, it was saying the journey that you laid out and the journey that they took is rarely even close. So if you look at like what, John Sample has been looking at over the last 12 months, these 5 web pages, then he looked at this YouTube video, then he he downloaded something off this email. It's like a ping pong ball or more like a pinball machine where the ball's just all over the place. So that's where, again, we try to use the human element where we bring the 2 teams to the table and say, like, okay, if this is the person, we can look at the person's full customer journey and with a grain of salt because you have no view into the dark uh, uh, content, emails that they shared with friends about it or whatever, pings, etc. You have no idea, or you can only guess as to what they've digested in terms of press, PR, things they've read, because none of that is directly tied to you. But you can bring your PR people to say, like, this was a huge story for this brand at this time, so you can make some guesses. But if you think about what this person has been looking at, the content they've been digesting, you could start to get it's almost like a mosaic where you're filling or a puzzle where you're filling different pieces where you don't have a complete picture of that journey or what that person was going to, but you have enough pieces in place that a vision starts to come to light. And you can discuss it as a team and say, likely this person is interested in this brand or this company because this is look at what they've been concerned with over the last 12 months, et cetera. So that the sales team on our client side, once they reach out to this person who's asked to have a consultation, they're not going in and saying, "How can I help?" They already have a pretty good sense of what's concerning this person. They can hit the ground running in a really empathetic one-to-one, going back to that one-to-one communication. We already get and to your point, Michelle, you wanna stay on this side of creepy where it's like, we know everything about you, but we kinda do, right? So, but to be able to engage someone in a way where, like, they know from the first moment you're talking to them, we get what concerns you, and we're here to help, and we're coming to this call with a bunch of information that you need to know. That's gonna build they've already You've earned their trust through the content that they've digested over a year. And now the first interpersonal interaction they're having with your brand, that person is extending that trust even further. Once you have that going on, like from MQL to SQL to sale is a process that comes very, very fast. So it's like this slow rolling snowball that just like hits all at once, and all of a sudden you have a new customer. So it's a long process, but and it's not a crisp, clean, this display ad led to this sale attribution process, but it is an if you think of attribution as an understanding of what the customer journey was after the fact and how it led to your success, that's a type of attribution, if you're open to thinking of it that way, that can be very, very valuable to your organization going forward.
Yeah,
There's
brilliant stuff. Michelle, did you have anything to add to that?
I have 2 quick things, completely separate though. The one, when we talk about multi-touch, if you are looking and you're seeing that you've got clients coming in, you've got leads coming in, but you realize that there's an area that is never touched, that is just as important an attribution when realizing that nothing came in from this channel. Nothing touched these people. That is when you look at what not to do, and that's sometimes the oversight. People try to prove that this is working. Look at all these people that this touched. I'm like, "Yeah, but none of those people actually did anything." They looked at it, they clicked on it, they cost you some money, and then they left. And those are the things that's a little bit harder to digest because as a marketer, you bought that display ad. You purchased those things and you have to be okay with not doing that anymore, right? And being okay with those decisions. The other thing about the creepy cool, one thing about our organization is because we are membership based, and we have a corporate partner program that is B2B. But our members identify their topical areas of interest. So we try to serve them content based on self-disclosed. I want information about these core topics. And then what we do is then when they take on information about these core topics and say, here are learning environments that will take a deeper dive in these content pieces that then drive them to for purchase things. Oh, you're a company that wants to talk about these areas of opportunity. We have customers and we have members and our stakeholders that are very in tune to wanting information about these topical areas of interest. So when you look at the reverse, using your inside data, your account management systems and your customer relationship, your CMS systems rather, to find out what data is being digested comparative to the data that people are saying they want, you can paint, to Greg's point, a pretty picture on, all right, well, this audience wants this type of data. This partner wants to serve this type of data. I might be able to help them with this, right? And that's how you create these packages to provide a solution to whatever problem that an organization is coming to you to solve.
Awesome stuff. You guys are brilliant. I really love talking to you. Final question, and we could go quite a while with the final question. But so this may be hard. You kind of already started a little bit in a very more tactical way, Michelle. You go, hey, if something doesn't work, stop doing it. What I started off by asking you, what's going well? What do you do more of? We got into content marketing that took us into AI, now measuring results. What's the top thing you advise people stop doing this?
Stop wasting your customers' time.
Mm.
When we talk about content for content's sake, stop doing that. If you don't have a reason to create content, don't. If you don't have something insightful to say, don't. Sometimes, um, repackaging something that was really good is really good. So people want to create new. I'm a big proponent of hub and spoke model content curation. You have a centralized piece of content. You've got a lot of spokes. All those spokes are different ways to deliver snippets, snackable content that drive people back to that central core piece of content. Because the shelf life, a lot of times on content, is a long time. especially if it's an ebook, especially if it's a prospectus, especially if it's our top 10 trends or our science strategy. There are a multitude of ways to present the snippets in that core piece of content that you can use in your campaigns for a very long time. And so I think you waste your readers' time by just trying to get them to look at the new shiny ball. When you really just want to drive loyalty, trust, and really have a really positive brand perception in your readers' eyes and in your customers' eyes. So for me, it's stop wasting people's time.
When you talk about that, which is great advice, it's something we kind of skip over. I know that the three of us always think about this, and I haven't mentioned it, but I often tell people be customer centric, be target audience centric, put them first before you step up with something you want to talk about that maybe no one cares about. That's got to be a foundation to everything we do.
It's an art form to be able to address, to actively listen to understand and not listen to reply. And then when you have a reply, make it insightful, make it valuable. And if you get a nod to tie it back to a solution you can offer, that is right there the utopia that you want to get to. It's hard. It is hard work to get to that. And you 9 times out of 10 will fail to reach all three. But if you get 2, listen actively and respond with a purpose that actually is engaging and insightful and as a human being, you're winning. So that I think we is really tied to I think the underpinnings of this conversation when it comes to AI, when it comes to tech, when it comes to content, when it comes to marketing, you have to be human. And the human touch will never be replicated or replaced.
Greg, do you want to get in on this?
Yeah, well, as Michelle was talking, something did occur to me that I would like to ask all people to stop doing, which is, and Michelle, you and I Perry touched on this earlier. We both said it to each other, and within this context, many times, but stop being a slave to data. Um, as much as data has given us over the last 15 years, it's transformed, radicalized marketing. I started as a marketer in 1997, where media kits kind of drove what you knew about an audience for ad placement, ad insertions. So like where we've come is it's absolutely incredible. However, if you are refusing to do anything that isn't validated by data, you are shortchanging your brand and your chance at really powerful marketing that leads to sales. We like to talk about, and Michelle, I know you have your own version of this. You talked about 10%, but we call it here the 90-10 rule. Of course, you want reliable um, engagement, impressions, opt-ins, etc., on a month-to-month basis if you're running a marketing team. You got to keep the audiences interested and involved, and data is going to go a long way toward letting you know what types of topics they want to know about, what types of formats they're going to engage with, etc. So yeah, you always want to go back to what's tried and true, but data by its nature lives in the past, and people change and cultures change and industries change. So rely on your data to inform your go forward strategy to the point where it starts to fall apart. And even when it's completely sound, still rely on it 90% of your content or 90% of your whatever, messaging, but carve out 10% to experiment, to try something new, something out of the box that it's a coin flip whether or not it's gonna work, but it's out there and it's different and something that you haven't tried before and none of your competitors have tried before. Because if you can throw something out there and you're only risking 10% of your time, of your budget on that, if it hits, that's where, viral stuff can happen, where something surprising hit your industry and people start talking about it because it's different and it's new and it's fresh and it's interesting. If you continue to rely on the 90% of what you know works, you're not going to surprise anybody. And your numbers are going to be good, but you're never going to have that breakthrough of like where people start talking. And when people start talking, that's an indicator of greatness in marketing. And you want to give yourself that chance at a low risk. Take even 5%, 10% of that content you're throwing out there. Take a chance. It's got to be on brand. It's got to be on voice. I'm not talking about offending people, but I'm talking about taking a risk of trying something that is new and different and potentially exciting and engaging, and throwing it out there and see how your audience responds.
I'm glad you added the caveat, 'cause I was gonna say calculated risk, because you wanna make sure, because on the flip side, you take an uncalculated risk and it's on the negative, then you've got a whole 'nother layer of challenge.
Absolutely.
So, calculated risk, and we talk about that risk can be a different platform to add, and we're not talking about, I mean, we're not talking about building a rocket ship or anything like that. We're talking about, okay, I've never advertised something as basic as, I've never advertised in this publication before. It's not our core audience, but let's see what happens. It can be something that small. Not a brand new ad campaign that you're spending $1 million on, that you're gonna risk that much money on. So it can be incremental changes and incremental pilots. So we talk at a high level right now, but it can be something as very basic as, I'm going to try to use different ad colors, but they're on brand, but we've never used these colors in an ad before. It can be that basic, just
Yep.
to see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
What
And
awesome,
yeah.
awesome advice. You two are just great. I love talking. I love talking with you and hearing the advice and spontaneously. I put you on the spot a couple times, but just great information that you've shared with our audience. I want to thank you for being with us today and thank you for being trailblazers. My guests have been Michelle Rovner. She's the director of marketing for ISPOR, the Professional Society for Health Economics and Outcomes Research. Greg Ippolito, he is the president and creative director of Ippolito Media Arts. Thank you so much for being with the Trailblazers, and I hope we got to have you back again. I don't think this will be our last talk.
Oh,
Anytime, Perry.
Barry.